Hello and welcome back to Lisa Lives. Today I want to talk about a new Netflix documentary that is creating waves. It is a case that I knew of that I had seen a documentary about previously, but this is one that people have started talking about now. Obviously Netflix has made this show. The show is called American Murder: The Family Next Door, and it just goes to show you really, when people look perfectly happy, the perfect family, that you really do not know what's going on behind closed doors. Now, I don't want to go into the happenings really detailed because I'm sure you can watch the show. It would do a much better job of telling you what happened than I will, but if you haven't seen the show, I will give you a brief idea about what happens. And obviously, since I want to talk about it and really get your viewpoints from what you thought, I do need to talk about some of the details anyway, so let's get started. It was August 2018. We're in Colorado, and a married couple, Chris and Shannan Watts, have two little girls, 4-year-old Celeste and 3-year-old Bella. Shannan is also actually pregnant, 15 weeks pregnant, and she knows she's having a little boy, which they had decided to call Nico. So the day of the actual disappearance of Shannan, it's August 13th, and her friend Nicole has actually just given her a lift home. She has been at a business meeting in Arizona. It's the early hours of the morning, it's almost 2 o'clock in the morning. She drops her home, her husband Chris and the girls are at home, her friend leaves her and goes back home. So the next day Shannan actually has an OBGYN appointment, which she misses. Now this is completely not like Shannan, and obviously her friend Nicole's texting her also, and she doesn't receive any reply to these text messages. Again, completely unlike Shannan. Now Nicole, this lady, this friend, this is the kind of lady you want to have in your life. One of the main things from watching this documentary that shone to me was what a good friend Nicole was. What a decent person Shannan must have been to have had such a dependable, close, just to have that friendship with someone that she had with Nicole, who was not going to be dissuaded, was not going to be quietened when she felt that something was amiss. So in the documentary we actually see Nicole go over to Shannan's house. There's no answer, no one seems to be there, but she spots a pair of Shannan's shoes through the door that basically they're never off her feet. She wears them constantly, and it's like she wouldn't have gone out without those shoes. Shannan's parents actually live a long way away, so they can't even come over to let her friend Nicole in, but they do manage to phone to get the combination for the garage to try to get into the house. We do see all this on film, as the documentary has got access to the police officer that was there, his body cam footage. Obviously they were called over because Nicole was concerned about what happened with Shannan. She called the police, and eventually Shannan's husband Chris, who was at work, shows up and lets them in. Now in the house everything is pristine, everything is just like a show home. Shannan's telephone is on the counter. Now she, that was her lifeline, and it says this in the documentary, she would go nowhere without it. The little girls are nowhere to be seen, but their blankies are also missing. Now anyone with a young baby, a young child, sometimes they get really attached to these little blankies, and the girls wouldn't go anywhere without them, and these blankies were missing. Now the documentary goes around the way of very much wanting it to look like Shannan has left Chris, they've had an argument. He said they had a very emotional conversation that morning. He sort of puts across that she's perhaps gone to sort of get some time and space away from him. Now I will say he comes across as extremely convincing, and he is one of these people that other women say, how could she have been so stupid, how has he fooled her, how this, how that. This guy comes across as being proper believable, I feel, when he's talking to the police officers. It's only when he actually goes into a neighbour's house that a few cracks start to show for me. A neighbour has CCTV footage of the outside of the property, which also happens to catch the driveway of Chris Watts' house. Now when they go in, he is showing the police officer this footage, and Chris is just cringing. He's gone from composed, calm, confident individual, and he's rubbing his head and he's fidgeting and he's rubbing his eyes and he's taking his glasses on and off, and he's just not the picture of someone with nothing to hide. Now we do picture him backing into the house on early that morning, the morning that she actually, well, the last time she was seen. He claims that people have been trying to break into work vans in the area and he was taking the tools into the house. That's what he was doing. Now, when he left, the policeman actually spoke to the neighbour, and the neighbour immediately, I love this guy, he's just an everyman, he's just says how he sees it, he doesn't pull any punches, and he says no. He says there's something weird, he's not acting right, this is suspicious. He's never emptied the tools out of his van, ever. And he doesn't normally behave like that. So right away on that very first day, when the police are just called out as like a check to let the friend in to see if she's okay, this neighbour has him pegged immediately. That's not normal for him. So next door neighbour guy knows there's something not quite right. But also, on top of this, Chris was trying to say that potentially she'd left to cool down or whatever and she'd taken the kids. The car was there with the kids' car seats in. Her wallet was still there. Everything that she would have needed was still there. Yeah, the girls' blankies had gone, but there was nothing gone of hers. There was no way for her to get anywhere. The car seats the girls would have needed, they were both very young children. So things are looking a bit suspicious for old Chris. Now he's on TV, here, there and everywhere, being interviewed by news stations, appealing for help, saying that as time passes, he thought initially she'd maybe just gone to get some time to herself, but now he's concerned someone may have taken her. When's the last time you've heard of someone taking not just the wife but two young children also? That in itself is not very usual. But I'm sure the entire neighbourhood all found it a bit odd. People did say that he sort of kept himself to himself, but he was friendly. It's not something they would have ever thought of him, but I'm sure the police had to have had their suspicions right from the start. Now, the documentary actually delves into, and what was really interesting is it actually delved into the text messages exchanged between Chris and his wife Shanann, and basically the falling apart of a marriage. It was really, really sad to read. The text that she sent to her friend, confiding in her, saying basically he doesn't ever seem to want me anymore, he doesn't want to sleep with me, maybe even if he doesn't love me, it's still sex, he'll sleep with me, but you know, she would say she was going for a shower, she was going to see what happened, she was going to basically offer herself to him, and he would like knock her down, or they wouldn't have seen each other for a long period of time and all he would want to do was work out on his weights. He'd lost a lot of weight. He was quite buff in quite good shape, but he seemed obsessional about his appearance and his looks. He just completely lost any interest in his wife sexually, emotionally. Obviously, anytime she tried to raise it, he would refute her. Now, I think anyone that's been through this in a relationship, male or female, you know when something's not right, you know when the relationship's in trouble. And no amount of someone saying to you, no, you're imagining things, and trying to reassure you. She knew something wasn't right, and she did confide this to her friend. She worried there was someone else. She obviously asked Chris over and over again, and he said no. But he was being dishonest. There was someone else. So old Chrissy baby had been playing away with a work colleague called Nicole Kessinger. Now, she claims that he told her he was separated, that he had children. Now, I don't know about you guys, but things did not sit very well for me coming from Nicole. It was said that Nicole found it very difficult that he had kids, and that it was an issue that he had kids. And we've all heard many stories about parents killing their own children because they thought that they would get in the way of a relationship proceeding with a new partner. This is a tale as old as time. This has happened over and over again. And it was said she had difficulty with the fact he had kids because she wanted to have all those things with someone herself, with someone that hadn't had these things before. Now, on interview, she completely denied this, denied that there was an issue, that she didn't like the fact he had kids. But that had to come from somewhere. I do feel that it was an issue that Chris had kids. She was quite potentially jealous that he'd had that with someone else and she hadn't. And obviously the fact that Shanann was pregnant also. That was a big shock to her because as far as she was concerned, while their relationship was ongoing, he was no longer intimate with his wife, they weren't together. All of a sudden she finds out that his wife is newly pregnant. So that obviously mustn't have gone down too well, but not badly enough for them to break off the relationship. Now, something I read after having watched the documentary, which it didn't go into, Chris actually gave Shanann oxycodone in an effort to try to make her miscarry their child, because he felt it would be easier going forward with Nicole if Shanann were not pregnant. So that was his first plan. He tried to say to the police that it was an act of rage what he did. He'd had an argument that morning with Shanann. She had confronted him with, basically she'd been away for a month. She'd come back and he basically had no interest. They walked into the house. He wasn't interested in talking to her and being intimate with her. He was more interested in working out. He would never have thought that she was away, and she had it, and she confronted him with it. And that's when they had a massive argument and he killed her in a fit of rage. Now, it's been found out since then, there's actually going to be a book published, Letters from Christopher, The Tragic Confessions of the Watts Family Murders. Now, this was written by a lady called Sherilyn Cadell, who Chris has been writing to since he went into prison. And he has admitted to her in these letters that he had planned Shanann and his daughter's murder before he actually did it. It wasn't an act of rage. He tucked his kids into bed that night knowing this will be the last time that I tuck my children into bed. Now think about that. Any parents amongst you, this is the last time I'm going to kill these children. As a mother, I would kill anyone that tried to harm my child, and I would very happily die protecting him or for him. The thought of killing your own flesh and blood, your own child, for a woman or a man, whatever it may be, is just... This man must have had something really evil inside him to do this. So he puts his kids to bed. We find out afterwards that he tried to smother them, and then he came back in and had an argument with Shanann and then proceeded to kill her. But in the process of this, children woke up. He hadn't succeeded in his task and he had to go back in and smother them again. Now, when this happened, old Nicole came forward to the police, and when she found out that Chris's wife and children had mysteriously disappeared, she was a bit edgy and she came forward to the police of her own free will because she was concerned. Now, I call bullshit, to be quite honest with you, because Nicole deleted all proof of any conversation she had had with Chris up to this point. So all the text messages, any email, anything that had passed between them, Nicole got rid of it. Now, may there have been some proof or some evidence within there that may have been useful in this lady's disappearance and her children. Why did Nicole feel the need to completely remove all conversation, all proof of conversation between Chris and herself? I do think this lady had made it. I'm not saying that she was involved in the plan for a second, but I do feel this lady had made it clear to Chris that him having children was a bit of a stumbling block and that she was struggling to deal with this. And then Shanann getting pregnant with the new child, I think this was like a nail in the coffin for her. I think it was an issue in the relationship, but they didn't end the relationship even though she had issue with this. And I think Chris, in his, I'm not going to say naivety, in his just pig-headed arrogance, wanted what he wanted. He wanted this woman, so he felt to get this woman, the only way he could achieve that was to wipe out his wife, his 2 daughters and his unborn son. The mind boggles. Now, I'm not going to go into detail of the ins and outs. Like I say, I wanted to talk to you about how I felt about the whole thing and how I felt about different aspects of the documentary, and also details of the post-mortem which I found out after having watched the documentary, which were not shared in the documentary and are very, very disturbing. Now, obviously, because I'm not going into a lot of detail, if you want to put further detail in the comments for other viewers, feel free, but I know there's a lot more to this case. I know different ins and outs of the case, but a lot of people will talk about this online in minute detail, and that wasn't my intention. So how did we get the confession? Well, initially, Chris answered all questions, denied everything, denied all knowledge, and agreed to take a polygraph. Now, the polygraph that he took, usually a score of -4 indicates normal score for lying. Chris's score was -18. It was off the charts. It was just it couldn't have been any more obvious that he was lying. How he explained this, now they used very clever reverse psychology on him. They brought his dad in to talk to him. You know, I think you need to tell us what we all already know. And his dad said to him, look son, what's going on? His dad's holding his hand, and he admitted to his dad that he had killed Shanann. But not content with having murdered this poor woman, he actually states that Shanann murdered her own children to get back at him. And in a fit of rage, he murdered her. Now, as he is actually saying this, his father is holding his arm. His son has just admitted to murdering his wife, and the father is holding his hand. Something that really disturbed me watching this documentary, obviously apart from the obvious horrible murders we're talking about here, is how Chris's parents felt about Shanann. It was very clear they didn't like her, they didn't approve. Now, I've been on the receiving end of this, it's not nice. He talked to his family about his marriage and that he wasn't happy, that they even knew he had a girlfriend. He had told his family that he was going to get a separation from Shanann. Meanwhile, poor Shanann is asking over and over, what's wrong, is there someone else? No, I promise we'll make it work, blah blah blah. He's telling his family he's not happy and he wants rid of her. His family are aware he's not happy, he doesn't want to be with her. His family support him in that. They never liked Shanann, they just don't have a relationship with her. But his family's support of him in this instance I found mind-boggling. I will go further with that when we talk about the court and his mother speaking. I was sickened, is the only way I can put that. He says he murdered Shanann because she killed the two children. Eventually this obviously changes and he admits that he murdered all three and that it was a moment of rage. He states that he killed Shanann, he had her in the bottom of his car, the two children were in the car, awake and alive, and he took them to the site and they were asking about their mum. Now, I would think potentially the children were probably murdered in the house and taken to the area. He claims they weren't, but to scar your children with taking a car ride and it was a long car ride with their mother's dead body and they were alive. He said they were huddled together on the back seat holding one another. It doesn't even bear thinking about. It just makes me shudder. So he takes them to this area where he'd locally worked in and he buries Shanann under 9 inches of dirt, and he takes each of his little daughters and he buries them in massive oil tanks full of crude oil. Puts one into each oil tank, his little girls, into tanks of oil. Now, that's not where it ends. Something that wasn't shared on the documentary was the autopsy, and I will warn you, this is disturbing if you don't want to hear. This is not concerning the little girls, I'm not getting into autopsies there, this is concerning Shanann because I feel it is an important fact that needs to be known. I'm just actually going to read a part of the autopsy report. I will put it on the screen also for you. Right, the first section of autopsy report, the portion that I think needs to be known here, is with regards to the 15-week-old baby. History of intrauterine pregnancy, 2nd trimester, largely decomposed fetus and placental unit found expelled from the gravid uterus. For anyone that's not aware, that means removed. It goes into more detail later. The external genitalia are largely normal adult female, however the internal genitalia are protruding through the vaginal vault. This likely represents prolapse of the uterus due to pregnancy and post-mortem artifact. Adjacent to the probable uterus is a largely degraded portion of tissue which is unfortunately covered in sandy debris from the gravesite. Upon further examination of this tissue, it is revealed to be a largely decomposed fetus. Gender and age cannot be determined. So Chris has actually removed the body of his unborn son from his mother. What reason? What? And obviously very violently, because there was obvious serious damage done there where internal structures were found protruding externally. It sounds like just everything has been ripped out. What on earth did he feel? Why? I mean, I could not get my head around this. My husband said that quite possibly he wanted to take everything from her, which is why he didn't bury her with her children. He wanted to remove that so she didn't have that, even in death. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if he perhaps thought that the pregnancy was viable. I have no idea, but if that were the case, why kill your own children? But this sick, twisted individual removed the unborn child from Shanann's body before discarding it beside her in the dirt. That tells you all you need to know about this individual. Obviously, he is serving a life sentence in prison. He only admitted to what he'd done to avoid the death penalty, the brave man that he is. The final point I want to make, other than the loathing that I have for this man, I can't even begin to tell you. I'm not going to say Shanann was a perfect person. I didn't know her. But it was very clear watching this documentary that she fought for her marriage. She was a very good mother. She wanted to make that marriage work. She tried. She confided in her friends. It showed texts between her and Chris, and he couldn't have been more disinterested in her and the marriage if he tried. So the last thing I want to raise is in court. Obviously, Shanann's mother stood up to speak about how she felt to Chris. She was a much bigger woman than I would have been. I think I would have had to have been dragged from that courtroom. I would have dived over the table to get to him. So she had a remarkable amount of restraint. Her father and her brother, who were very close to her, obviously were very distressed, too distressed to speak. But Chris's mother gets up and addresses her son. I'm not going to go into all of what she said because I don't believe she deserves the time or concentration, but she told her son that they forgave him for what he had done. Now you tell me, do you think that it is her place to forgive her son for murdering someone else's daughter and mother, someone else's grandchildren? I forgive you for what you have done. That is not your place, dear. I'm afraid that is not your place to forgive him. That's the place, if they wish to, of Shanann's parents and brother, which I very much doubt they ever will. I never would. But for that woman to have that audacity to stand up in court and tell him, given what he did, that they forgave him, the apple didn't fall far from the tree.
Now to my son Christopher, I have known you since the day you were born into this world. I have watched you grow from a quiet and sweet, curious child who Bella reminded me so much of, to a young man who worked hard in sports and later mechanics to achieve your goals. You are a good friend, brother, father, and son. We have loved you from the beginning, and we still love you now. This might be hard for some to understand, how I can sit here under these circumstances and tell you, although we are heartbroken, although we can't imagine what could have led us to this day, but we love you. Maybe you can't believe it either. As the Lord said in Jeremiah 3:31, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore, I have continued my faithfulness to you. And you, as your mother, Chris, I have always loved you, and I still do. I hate what has happened. Your father and sister and I are struggling to understand why. But we will remain faithful as your family, just as God remains faithful because of his unconditional love for us all. We love you, and we forgive you, son.
Some parents just cannot see fault in their children. They will forever be blue-eyed boys. It's why we have mother-in-law jokes. Some people will never see fault in their offspring, and everything always has to be the fault of the in-law, of the daughter-in-law, of the son-in-law. And in this case, obviously, Chris is the parents' blue-eyed boy, and Shanann is just to be discarded. And they forgive him. Well, I hope you sleep well in your bed at night, Mrs. Watts. And that is my viewpoint of American Murder, The Family Next Door. What did you think? How did you feel? How did you feel? The main reason for doing this, I really would like some other opinion. How did you feel about the girlfriend? Why do you feel she deleted the text message? Do you feel Chris having children was an issue? Do you feel it was Chris's mother's place to forgive him for what he done? And why do you think that Chris removed his unborn child from his wife's womb? It's a harrowing one, and the world has lost a mother and 2 young little girls and an unborn little boy. And it's just sickening, and may he rot in jail, and it's too good a place for him, in my opinion. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this case. Thank you for watching. Over and out from Lisa Lives.